Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to touch further on Boris Johnson's appalling statement that NHS workers should pay more than the average British citizen for accessing the health services that they themselves provide, simply because his scam brings in a lot of money. But he misled Parliament as to how much money it does bring in. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, for those who aren't aware, the NHS is funded via a portion of our taxes. Migrants in the UK pay their taxes at the same rate as UK citizens. It's not any less just because they're not British citizens. And this should cover the NHS as well. But it doesn't. And never one to be fair, the Conservative government charge an NHS surcharge to use this service. This means that hundreds of thousands of migrant nurses, doctors, paramedics, care home workers and other essential frontline staff, particularly at a time like this, are paying hundreds or even thousands of pounds extra to be allowed access to those health services on top of the taxes that they pay to Her Majesty's Treasury on exactly the same terms as a British worker being paid on the same basis. And this policy, at least as far as healthcare workers is concerned, has become extremely unpopular, as you might imagine, at a time like this. And in defending this appalling travesty, Boris Johnson was happy to acknowledge that foreign NHS workers had saved his life. Those were his words. He acknowledged that they'd saved his life. But at the end of the day, Sodom was his response. Now, it has to be said that a day later, this is yesterday, the Prime Minister has had to climb down in embarrassing fashion and agree to go along with the Labour proposal for scrapping the surcharge for healthcare workers. But when Labour leader Keir Starmer was originally organising a motion in Parliament to make all healthcare workers exempt from the surcharge, he asked the Prime Minister to support it. Now, in response, Boris Johnson said that we can't do without the money, that we're fleecing from them. He said their contributions help us raise about £900 million. Now, at this point, he misled Parliament. Now, I don't mean he lied to Parliament. Some people are reporting this as he lied. He didn't. But what he said was, his exact words were, those contributions help us to raise about £900 million. But the heavy implication in that is that the migrant healthcare workers are paying about £900 million via the surcharge on top of their taxes, but they aren't. So where does the figure come from? Because £900 million is a figure for all migrant workers, for a start, paying the surcharge, not just healthcare workers. But Starmer was asking specifically about healthcare workers. Boris Johnson, in his lead up to this £900 million figure, was talking about migrant healthcare workers as well. No, neither of them were talking about migrants in general. So what was the £900 million about? So what Johnson said was not a complete lie, because note the wording. He said they help raise 900 million. Not that they raise 900 million. They help. So their part of the surcharge is a contribution towards that overall large tally of £900 million. Fine. But why not give the figure contributed by healthcare workers, as that's what he was asked about? Like, if someone were to ask him how many NHS workers had died as a result of coronavirus, which they do on a regular basis, he wouldn't respond with how many people in total have died. Of course not, because that would be a really large number and make them look really bad. And also, it's not what he was asked. In that case, he wants to say a smaller number. But in this particular case with the figure, he wants it to be large and impressive. You know, he doesn't care about misleading Parliament and, by extension, the people in this country. But it didn't end there. If it was literally just that, it would be quibbling about semantics. Yes, he's given a misleading figure. Is it really all that appalling? Not in itself. I wouldn't have given it a second thought. But Johnson's pulled a number out of his arse and let the media and the opposition parties have to, quibble over it later on. But the figure was more misleading than that. Because, okay, you say to yourself, all right, he said their contribution goes towards this 900 million and the 900 million is for all migrant workers. All right, fine, we understand that. So now the impression you'll be getting in your head is, so £900 million is what all migrants contribute towards the NHS budget via the surcharge in a year, is it? No. No, it's not. The figure, which is more precisely £917 million, is the amount raised from the start of the 2015 tax year to the end of the 2019 tax year. So it's 4 years worth of contributions. Because that makes sense, 4 years, that's a thing. I mean, what the hell is that figure used for in this context? So it's not only misleading, because a budget is set every year. Parliament sets a budget every year, so you'd expect any figures used to be annual. Now, sometimes governments give figures if they want them to sound large and impressive, like, for example, funding for the NHS, then they might use figures over a whole Parliament. Now, it might be projected figures rather than the actual figures, but it would, over an overall Parliament, they may sometimes justify using that, but that's not what this is either. Because those 4 years represented two parliaments. There was a general election in 2017 and then another in 2019. So what's so special about these 4 years? It's when the scheme began. He's just using the total amount that has been raised via this since the Conservatives put it in 2015. So what's the actual figure, the useful figure? Like the surcharge for NHS workers for a year. It's 35 million. So why not use that figure? Reason is because it would make him look ridiculous. Correction, more ridiculous. Because even when you count in all healthcare workers, not just NHS workers, all healthcare workers, the amount still comes to less than the amount he pissed away on his ill-conceived Brexit advertising campaign last autumn. And that would be the problem, wouldn't it? If you gave the understandable figure, the clear figure, the figure that people would think you're giving, then they'll draw all sorts of comparisons to schemes that provided no benefit, that cost even more in taxpayer money. So he needed a large figure, like nearly £1 billion. And he knew he couldn't justify the charge on moral grounds, because it's really deeply unpopular with the public. You've even got the headbanging Daily Mail arguing against the charge. There doesn't seem to be a section of society that thinks this charge is fine. There might be individuals who do. There are individuals who've argued for it. But even those who've argued against immigration have said that this surcharge is wrong. Quite a lot of Tory MPs were saying that they would support the Labour motion. So what Boris Johnson did is he tried to argue it on pragmatic grounds. Yes, it was terrible. I mean, I had to think about it long and hard. But we just can't balance the books without it. What's that? Tax the billionaires? No. Quite out of the question. No. We must fleece those who don't earn very much. Those on minimum wages, absolutely fantastic. Even though most healthcare workers have to work for 70 hours, as was stated in Parliament, 70 hours to actually pay off that surcharge. And that's not counting the total amount they contribute to the NHS via their taxes. So he needed that suitably large figure to quote, even if the figure was misleading. And what this exercise really does is highlight the importance of scrutinising politicians' words for meanings. Never just assume that what you think is meant by the ambiguity is what is actually meant. And this is why I think part of Keir Starmer's effectiveness is he's very, very precise with his language in Parliament when scrutinising the Prime Minister. He asks questions in a way that it is not possible to answer them with an ambiguous answer without being misleading, which of course means that Boris Johnson doesn't answer any of the questions, and where it looks like he has, it's actually always misleading. Which I suppose is why, for the few days after Prime Minister's questions, all sorts of things come out of the woodwork to put Boris Johnson back in the spotlight, which is why, of course, he's been doing so badly since he had to start facing Starmer in PMQs. And what we have here is just another example of how Johnson's performance at Prime Minister's questions is turning into very damaging criticisms for him over the following hours and days. And I would expect this pattern to continue, because for all his cheap tricks, he's going to keep coming unstuck in the analysis later on. Because either it will have to be pointed out he's not answering the question, or it will be pointed out that the answer he gave is wrong. But as I said earlier, on this particular front, Boris Johnson has had to climb down. And this is remarkable, Because I was thinking at the time, he must know he's going to win this motion. He must know he's going to have enough of his own MPs supporting it. Because if he were to lose this motion, if enough MPs were to support Labour's motion to cancel the surcharge, then it would come at great political cost to him to have backed so forcefully a very unpopular policy. When actually he could have responded to Starmer then, of course we're going to scrap it. Yes, you're quite right. At a time like this, it's particularly insulting. We agree. And actually it could have looked good for him. But now he's lost that completely. He's gone back on it the following day. And everyone will know the reason he's gone back on it is because it looked like his own MPs were not going to support him, that they were going to vote for the Labour motion. And the last thing that Boris Johnson wants to do right now is, with an 80-strong majority, lose the first vote so early on in Keir Starmer's leadership of the opposition. Now, it will still come at a political cost to him, but obviously not as great a political cost as losing to Starmer in a vote with an 80-strong majority so early. But anyway, that is the latest fallout from another, well, disastrous Johnson PMQ. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.